Testing, testing, testing. We'll be started in just a second. I'm sorry we were late. We were just trying to be efficient and wrap up a few matters. So just give us one more minute and we'll be ready to go. Yeah. All right, welcome everybody to our March 8th workshop. At this time, we would like to have our superintendent lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be appropriate for a minute to have a moment of silence in memory of the loss of our 14-year-old Murphy student, Comet Shaw. Thank you. All right, we're going to move to item 4A, Strategic Planning Committee. Dr. Scanlon.
So Eureka, the survey is done. The results are in. We have, this is the loveliness of it all here. All its glory. Everyone got one of those. We will be having tomorrow evening, the governing committee of the Strategic Planning Committee will be meeting to review the results. The board has called a special meeting on Monday to review the results with the entire community. The entire document, even the comments about me, will be posted on the website along with all the results so the entire community can see this. Subsequent to the board meeting on Monday, we'll start to plan out some meetings probably beginning next week and the week after with the community, both during the day and at night, so that we will show the community the results as well over at Murphy in groups so that people can see what the results were from each different group and the overall comments that were made. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. Okay, and we will go now to 4B, discussion of the 2023-24 budget. Mr. Carlson.
Thank you. Ingrid, can you switch to the, okay, thank you. Okay, so tonight is our first actual discussion on the budget. I mentioned some things budget related at the last meeting, but tonight's our first official board discussion about the budget. So just to give you an idea of what's coming up, timeline-wise, the board adopts the budget on April 12th. We'll have another meeting on March 22nd after tonight. Before then, something else I'll talk about in a minute, the Budget Advisory Committee. We have 3 more meetings scheduled with them prior to the board adopting the budget. And when the board has to adopt the budget, that's set by State Education Department, and everything works backwards from the date of the budget vote, which is the 3rd Tuesday in May. So the day after the board adopts the budget, I submit the property tax report card to the State Education Department. The budget hearing, which will be at the May 3rd board meeting, it's called a budget hearing. It's really just to discuss what the proposed budget that will be voted on is. There's no change in the budget at that point. It's just to present the budget to the public at a board meeting of again, what they will be voting on on May 16th. The budget hearing, that's a term that the state requires us to use. Sometimes people think it's still a discussion about the budget and there can still be decisions made. That's not the case. The budget hearing has to be between 7 and 14 days prior to the budget vote. That sets when that is going to be. And then, of course, the third Tuesday in May, which this year is May 16th, is when the budget vote will be. Tonight, I'm going to discuss the tax cap, where we are right now with state aid. We'll touch a little bit on staffing. Dr. Scanlon will lead most of that discussion about staffing, and some other budgetary items that we're looking at in putting the budget together. I just want to address a little bit about the Budget Advisory Committee. We've had 2 meetings so far. We had a meeting scheduled last week that we had to postpone, or reschedule that meeting. We have that scheduled for March 21st. So we have next week, March 15th, the following week, March 21st, and the week after, March 28th, are the 3 more remaining Budget Advisory Committee meetings. At the last meeting we had, Dawn Mason did a presentation about the Pupil Personnel Services and Special Education Department. That presentation, as well as any others that we do at the Budget Advisory Committee, are posted to the district's website. On that same page, if you look at the district's website, there's a area for Budget Advisory Committee. If you click on that, and then it brings you to where it says click here for presentations or something to that effect. If you click on that, all those presentations are listed. Also, we have other presentations that have been done recently that we figured, well, we'll put the more information we can put on there, the better, about things going on in our district. For instance, at last month's board meeting, Erin Connolly did a presentation about, well, the whole guidance department did a presentation about the guidance department. That's on there. Jack Blaum did a presentation about security. We put that on there. Deidre Rubenstrunk did a couple of presentations this year, one on cybersecurity, one on technology. We put those on there. So we want people to understand when we're talking about the budget, well, here's what that pays for. All the different things, all the programs, all the services that we offer. We're proud of all the offerings that we have, and we want to show them off. And this way, it's all in, as much of it as we can put in one place and let people see the kind of things that are going on in our district. I got a great presentation that Jen Tretner sent about the art department. That's on there as well. It's really good, and I think you'd enjoy looking at those if you haven't already. The Budget Advisory Committee is it's going well. I think I see one of our members in the back here tonight. Hope you're enjoying your time under Mr. Costas on the Budget Advisory Committee. And as I said, we have a few more meetings to go. So the tax cap, and it's the same this year as other years in the sense of the way the cap gets calculated. And probably those of you that listen over the years, you've heard me say time and time again, the cap, it varies from year to year and from district to district, even within that same year. It's not a 2% tax cap. One of the factors in determining what the tax cap is can be no more than 2%. It can be less than that particular variable can be less than 2%, it can't be more. That's where 2% comes from. But there are other factors as well that go into that. Sometimes our cap is more than 2%, sometimes it's less than 2%. This year, coming up year, the budget we're working on now, our cap for next year is 2.65%. There have been years when it's been below 2%, other years when it's been higher than 2%. One year it was somewhere around 4.5%. As I said, I've shown you in the past that crazy formula that the State Ed Department came up with to determine the cap. But you'll see, like if they do print it in Newsday, you'll see districts, some above 2%, what their cap is, some above 2%, some below 2%, even within the same year. So in our case, our cap for next year is 2.65%. The budget that we bring forth to ultimately recommend that the board adopt, and then hopefully the board adopts that budget, and then that's the one that will be voted on, will, at least the one we recommend to the board, will comply with that tax cap. Our recommendation is not to go below the cap. As you know, we've discussed before, sometimes it's tempting to say, let's even go further below. That gives us even less wiggle room within the budget, and it's limiting our resources. This year that we're in, a year ago, we went $290,000 below the tax cap. So that's that much money less we have to work with, not just this year, but every year forever, actually compounded by whatever the percent increase is. And as you'll see in a minute, just to comply with the cap by itself is hard enough to do, and we have to reduce a number of budgetary line items, including some staffing reductions, just to get to that 2.65%. So if we wanted to go below that, we'd have to cut even further. So that will be our recommendation, to go at the cap. To comply with the cap, but to not go below it. State aid, I spoke a little bit about last time. There's no news on state aid since then. The governor's budget proposal was released on February 1st. In it, it appears that our state aid is increasing by about $2.4 million next year. However, most of that is in the form of universal pre-kindergarten aid. We do not have a universal pre-kindergarten program, a UP, otherwise known as a UPK program. A UPK program, there's a lot of strings attached to it, a lot of rules we have to follow. Even though we would get additional aid for it, the cost to the district would be more than that aid. So it would actually cost us more money than the program we have to run. And so we have done analysis over the years. And we do that every so often just to make sure, does it look like a universal pre-K program would be good for us or not? At this point, it still looks like it would not be. If that number, what they give in universal pre-K aid, keeps going up over the next few years, it might be different. If it goes up again next year, we'll look at it again. If it goes up, and we'll see. It might be at some point down the road. Could be next year, could be 5 years from now, who knows? It could be at the point where we say, you know what, we want to get that universal pre-K money, so we want to start a universal pre-K program. That would be a whole nother discussion, not for tonight, but so what the state started doing, this is, you know, it's kind of sneaky, they started adding the universal pre-K aid, potential aid, into the, when they run out all the districts around the state and all the aid categories they're called the state aid runs, they started adding what the universal pre-K aid could be as into the state aid package. Only one reason to do that, to make it appear that state aid, the total state aid package for the whole state, is higher than it really is. They used to only list that number if a district had a UPK program. So it really confuses things, unfortunately. So even when you see, like if you look at Newsday, and they ran it, and they'll probably do it again, when they show how much state aid every district is getting and how much of an increase, you'll see in our case it's about $2.4 million increase. However, it's not really that much. We're getting, in the governor's proposal, it will be approximately a little over $800,000 more. I would expect that when the final budget is completed and approved by the state legislature and signed in by the governor, it will be some higher than that, probably $1 million. That would be my guess of an increase, which is fine. I mean, we'll take it. You know, I'm not saying that. But you're going to see a lot, especially when it gets closer to the May 16th budget vote date. You're going to see a lot in the media about the record amounts of state aid and the enormous, tremendous increases some districts are getting in state aid. I spoke a little bit last time about that. And it's not picking on anyone. It's not saying anyone deserves this or doesn't deserve that. Not at all. The single biggest piece of state aid, it's a number of different formulas. The biggest one is called foundation aid. The Brentwood School District, for instance, their foundation aid next year is going up by $79 million. That's their increase in that aid category for next year. Not just a one-time shot. Their annual aid will go up by that. The William Floyd School District is $46 million. Their foundation aid is going up. I mean, those are mind-boggling numbers. So ours is going up by $800,000. And the only reason ours is going up is because every district gets a minimum 3% increase. And that's where, or it's $800,000 and change, comes from, is that minimum 3% foundation aid increase that every district will get. That's not it is what it is, all right? So, but when you see the tremendous amounts of money that some school districts are getting, and a lot of those cases saying we're not increasing our taxes at all, or they're decreasing the taxes, well, that's why. Well, if we got an additional $40 million in state aid, I think we could all assume we're going to lower taxes some with that, but that's not the case. So the state budget is due by April 1st. It will probably be done right around then. It usually is in more recent years. There was a stretch of time, some of you, especially Mrs. Gish and Dr. Kerman, who were on the board way back, there was a stretch, it was 25 years in a row the state budget was late. And not by like a day or two, months, right? So we were really flying by the seat of our pants and taking wild guesses as to what state aid would be. So these more recent years, the state budget is completed right around April 1st, I mean, within a couple of days of that. So it'll probably be the case again this year, at least we hope so. So the budgetary reductions in order to comply with the budget. Now, before I turn it over to Dr. Scanlon and talk about some of the staffing, a lot of these are not so much and as much as possible, not cutting programs and services, but where can we make reductions in the budget that will have as minimal impact as possible on our students and the programs and services that we offer. We haven't reduced staffing in quite a number of years. We've had a reduction in decline in enrollment over the last, even in the last 10 years. I mean, we've gone down 2,000 kids in the last 10 years. So where we had started talking about doing some staffing reductions a few years ago, and then COVID hit. And then that kind of put a kibosh on that. In fact, we had to go up staffing to do all the distancing and all of that. And so now we're trying to reset everything and get back to where we want our staffing to be more in line with what our student enrollment is. So, Dr. Scanlon, do you want to address that?
So part of the reduction that we're looking at for staffing is primarily, again, to the declining enrollment, which we've been talking about since July of this past year. And it's unavoidable. We just don't have as many students as we used to. We were about approximately 7,400 students in 2012. We're around 5,500 students now. So that's across the board, secondary and elementary. We do attract students to our district on a tuition basis, but not enough to offset the mass decline we had. We went up slightly during COVID, about 200 more students at that time, where we had to increase staffing as well because we were one of only 3 districts on the island that were full-time in person and giving a remote option. So that unfortunately is part of the reason of the amount of staff we're looking at reducing. The rest of the reduction is due to the fact that we simply don't have enough money to sustain where we are at right now financially. Our biggest expense in our budget is staffing. It's over 75% of our budget, right, Jeff? I think that's the exact percentage, somewhere in that range. This does not mean that we're going to be increasing class sizes exponentially. We're actually below or at the contractual averages with what we're looking at right now across the board. It will affect both elementary and secondary. We are not losing electives. We are not losing programs of any of this. There are some rumors floating out there on Facebook that I don't have Facebook, thank God, because I probably would run screaming from the room if I read everything that's said on it. The idea that we are doing this because of the survey that was done, that we were already planning, has nothing to do with anything from the survey. This is none of the plans from the survey or what recommendation that would be implemented minimally until 2024, 25. It depends on whether or not we can accomplish it even by that time frame. So, however, some of the great ideas that we've been plotting out with this, with even those discussions, we are not going to have the money to do. We would love to try to put the FLES program in place. We don't have enough money for it. We would love to try to put some of the other programs we discussed, but we don't have enough money for it. So it's simply that. We will be barely covering what we need for staff to be able to keep our classes at a reasonable size and still not impact students' education and maintain the programs and electives that we can offer. Any further expenses, and literally Mr. Carlson has been a genius with this, but on a weekly basis, get another increase and another increase and another increase that impacts us. Just last week, we got a $600,000 increase in transportation costs. Our TAN, the tax anticipation note and percentage rate went up about $500,000. So we're constantly getting barraged with issues like that that impede our ability to take the money that we could have used to devote to this. In addition, retirements. While we have potentially numbers of retirements in all of our different units, the number of people that could retire are not retiring. The finances of the times right now, whatever their personal circumstances are, inflation or whatever their situations are, they are not retiring. So in a case in point where in the teachers union alone, we had 25 potential teacher retirements, only 9 teachers retired. So that offset there didn't come in. So that could have decreased the number of potential staffing reductions we could have done, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So those are some of the issues. I have to compliment Mr. Carlson and Mrs. Castaldo in the business office, because they spent the entire February break culling through codes, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of codes in our district, in our budget, and trying to cut back on some things just to get us to reduce some money so that we could recapture and offset some of the things that are coming in. So just imposing a little bit on Mr. Carlson's part of his presentation too. We are still seeking other sources of revenue, though. We did ask BOCES to come in a couple of weeks ago to take a look at a couple of pieces of our facility that they could rent from us. We have yet to hear back from them. We're hoping that that will come through. If that does come through, we can talk about potentially reducing some of the reductions that in some of the areas that we're looking at right now. But unless that comes through, there will be no funds for that. We're looking to even expand some of our programs that already exist to take in some additional tuition students. The board, as you heard earlier this year, is now allowing for elementary tuition-based students. We have 2 students right now that are coming in on the elementary level that are not related to PPS programs that we have. They're paying tuition out of pocket to us. The state has raised that rate for tuition exponentially as well. Our non-resident, there are 4 areas: the non-resident general education rate, resident general education rate, special education rate, non-resident general education rate, secondary, elementary and secondary. So those 4 areas, the secondary alone is up to $95,000 per student coming in. So every new student coming in, that brings in $95,000. So elementary is at what, Jeff? About $21,000.
Elementary, regular elementary, special ed,
92,000. So that helps as well, bringing in tuition students. So the academy has been accepting students all along since its inception. It's up to 9 students from out of district. So anything will help. So we are looking to do partnerships with other programs. We will be contacting Stony Brook University. We have a great relationship with them to see if there is any chance that they would want to rent any of our facilities as well. Any means possible, bless you, to bring in some source of revenue to sort of offset this. And hopefully we can get through this year and then move forward. I just want to say that the vote, the budget vote going down a couple of years ago is still having a major impact on us. It is not something that's going to go away tomorrow. We're going to feel this for years to come. The reduction last year, we're going to feel it for years to come. So that money compounds annually as we move forward. We are doing everything humanly possible to analyze areas where we can have cost reductions and the codes, as we said, in other areas, so that we can save a few dollars. Every $10,000 in our budget is a 0.1 of staffing that we can use. That's one section of an elective at a secondary level or a half-year course. So we want to do everything humanly possible. So that's presently where we're at.
As Dr. Scanlon mentioned, inflation is just like for us personally, in our daily living expenses, it's killing us. Everything is costing so much more. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that really hurts with the tax cap. There's nothing in the tax cap about that. That's just too bad. The that one variable that is tied to inflation, that's the piece that can't be more than 2%. So it doesn't matter that our inflation this past year was over 6%, and including on things like transportation contracts and all of that, it's going up that much. That variable cannot exceed 2%. Again, that doesn't mean our tax cap is 2%, but that piece of it. And it just, and there's nothing we can do about it. So,
Jeff, if I may, for just one second,
sure.
I just want to give a compliment to our board members, because many of them joined us at the legislative breakfast, and I've attended meetings with the state senators and our assemblymen in the area to advocate for the district on behalf of the district in these areas. Particularly, we are considered a high wealth district. That aid that we're getting is ridiculously low, in my opinion. But at the same time, when the tax cap was put into effect, we did not have the rate of inflation we have today. So the tax cap does not adjust for the rate of inflation. So one of the things that we've been advocating for is that there be some consideration moving forward. If inflation is going to increase, the tax cap should have some type of requisite in there where it would adjust to a rate of inflation to help support us. Because without that going up with the rate of inflation in some capacity, we are going to take major cuts in a lot of different areas. And we're lucky for next year where it's not going to affect programs. But if it continues at this, it will. So we need to keep advocating with our local politicians, our representatives, to make sure that they are aware of what our concerns. Many of the districts that we went to those meetings with shared those same exact concerns. The local organizations from the Nassau County School Boards Association, Suffolk County School Boards Association, the School Superintendents Association for both Nassau and Suffolk, and all of Long Island. The state level have all been advocating for the same thing, to try to have this adjusted in some capacity. So hopefully it will resonate somewhere in Albany as this moves forward, and there'll be some movement there, but we're keeping our fingers crossed.
So, and along those lines with advocating for more in state aid, it's again, it's nothing to say that districts, the ones I mentioned, Brentwood or William Floyd or any other district, shouldn't get what they're getting. That's fine. But if you compare what Three Village taxpayers pay in state tax versus what we get back in state aid, it's not even close. So when you do your New York State personal income tax return, and on it, it asks you what school district you live in. That's for doing state aid purposes. And while I don't know exactly the amount of income taxes everybody in Three Village pays, it would be in the neighborhood of $300 million, roughly, in New York State income taxes, Three Village residents. We get back less than $50 million in state aid. So somebody's got to pay for that $79 million that's going to Brentwood and the $46 million going to William Floyd. So, and it's unfortunate that, you know, you can have one district getting $79 million extra and another one getting $800,000 increase. But that's the way it is. So we continually advocate, as Dr. Scanlon mentioned, the board always does. The School Superintendents Association does, and my association, the school business officials, we do as well. And we will continue doing that. We went through all the budget codes. We cut where we could, everything we think we can. And, you know, we keep saying to all of our administrators now, and I'm you know, not trying to say it in a funny way or anything, we're really going to learn the difference between we need something and we want something. And that's just the way it's going to be. We're cutting everything we possibly can, again, with as minimal impact as possible on student services. Also, the fees, Dr. Scanlon mentioned, we'll be increasing the fees that we charge. We haven't done that. We certainly have not kept pace with inflation over the years with what we charge for our SAC program, our enrichment programs, when we do use of facilities, all of those kind of things. We have not kept pace with inflation, and that's been something that, you know, is almost a community service trying to do, but those items too are costing more and more and more. So those fees will be increased where we can to help try to mitigate some of the other reductions we might have to make. So the voting itself, I mentioned Tuesday, May 16th. It's the third Tuesday in May. And we changed it to all voting at the, in the gymnasium at Ward Melville High School, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's working out very well with all of the voting being there. It's easy to section that part of the building off from the rest of the school building where students are. We don't have, if you remember, when we had it at the elementary schools, especially Arrowhead and Mount, where we had to put the voting machines, people had to go traipsing halfway through the school to get to where they vote. And remember, we cannot ask for ID when somebody comes to vote, not just in the general election, but in a school budget vote too. Not allowed to do it. Seems kind of silly, you know, on school budget vote day, you're not, every other day of the year, you need to scan your license and all of that, but you're coming here to vote, oh, come on in. Kind of reminds me of when I was in the military, and, you know, to get on the base, you had to show this, you had to show that, your car had to be registered, blah, 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 they check, make sure nothing's the car, mirror underneath the car, okay, now you can come on. What if you had a Domino's pizza sign on your car? Come on. So, but that's the way it is. So one thing I really want to mention to everybody when they come out to vote, and I'm going to say this at every one of the budget presentations we do when we go around to the PTAs and the civics, is just ask people, think for yourself, vote what you think is best for you and your kids. We, as school officials, including the board and administration, we cannot advocate for people to vote yes on the budget. We're not allowed to do that. It seems kind of silly, but we can't. We could spend months and months and months of work putting the budget together. We can't say, this is a really good budget, you should vote yes for it. We're not allowed to say that. We can present factual information. We can't say your child's education will be negatively impacted if the budget fails. We're not allowed to say such things, because that's more more subjective than objective. So, but think for yourself. What do you think is best for you and your kids? If you think your kids in school will be better off if the budget fails and we have to cut, in addition to what we're doing, another $3 million or so from the budget, then vote accordingly. That's all I can say. Not what somebody tells you on Facebook how you should vote, but think for yourself and vote for what you think is best for you and your kids. So now what we'll be doing is we're working with all of our building principals and district level administrators on that staffing, the staffing reductions, again, to have as minimal impact as possible on the programs and services for all our kids. We're working on that. Hopefully we'll be done with that, and certainly before the next board meeting, we'll have the draft of the line item budget for you. And we're going through all of that, and we'll be presenting those findings and recommendations to the board, and also what we discussed at Budget Advisory Committee. So that's all I had for you tonight, and of course, I'd be glad to take any questions anyone may have.
So, since it is a workshop, speak freely. Who has a question? Okay, Skish?
Jeff, would you talk a little bit about the list of at-risk districts from the controller's office? You know,
Oh, sure.
that
So
list
the
that were on
fiscal
that-
stress.
Right.
So if you remember, a couple of months ago, well, I guess it was in Newsday last month, but the results came out, I think it was in December, of the New York State Comptroller. They started some years ago a formula for determining not just it's the school districts, but they also do municipalities under various levels of fiscal stress. There are a number of things they look at. And the way it works is a point system, 0 to 100 points. The fewer the points, the better, right? So anything below 25 points is no designation. That's what we want. We got 26.7 points, which means susceptible to fiscal stress. It doesn't necessarily mean, uh-oh, you guys are in big trouble. It means, you better keep an eye on stuff. And in our case, all of our points that we got, those 26.7 points, all of them have to do with the amount of fund balance and reserves that we have because of what we used during COVID. So, again, I know we keep saying it over and over and over, and I've been saying it for 3 years now. To keep schools open that year during COVID cost us over $7 million extra. There was special legislation passed that year that allowed us to take money from reserves that we didn't have budgeted for if we were using it for COVID-related purposes, and we did. The community spoke, the board listened, said you have money in reserves. If that'll help keep our kids in school, that's what we want, and that's what we did. And we were one of the very few districts anywhere, not just in Suffolk County or on Long Island or in New York or even in the country, in the world, that kept schools open for every single one of our kids that wanted to come to school 5 days a week, K to 12, from the first day of school in September to the last day of school in June. Almost nobody did that. We did, and it cost a lot of money. And that's how our reserves went down so low. And for anyone who, I've heard people say, you have plenty of money, you got lots of money, you got lots of money, you got lots of money. Well, the comptroller is saying, no, you don't. No, we don't. We don't have that much, and we need to start working on that. That's what the fiscal stress thing is telling us. We need to start doing that. Now, what we've been doing, part of the special legislation for taking money from reserves, is we have to start paying it back. So we've been doing that, and we have that actually built into our budget now this year, and it's coming up year. We'll be paying back more. And we want to continue doing that. We want to pay the minimum we have to pay back is $2 million. And we're doing that over 5 years, $400,000 a year. The over 7 extra that we would love to replenish all of that and then some. We would love to be in a position where hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. But if it does, we'll be in a position where we could do that again if we wanted to. And so we're working towards that. So, but that's what the comptroller's report said, is that Three Village, you don't have a lot of money. We, meaning the comptroller, thinks we should have more money in fund balance and reserves than we do. And I couldn't agree more.
That's right, we should.
Jeff?
Yes.
According to your plan there, you have 30 FTEs that we're supposed to be letting go. Is that mostly elementary, middle school, high school? How does that work? How does that divide up to 30?
I'll let Dr. Scanlon address that.
It is a mix of both. It's not just one or the other. And as Jeff pointed out in the second to last slide, a lot of that is due to course selections by students as well. So we go through and see how many students are interested in certain elective areas, how many students we have total from our population. We go through because we do have contractual obligations with the TVTA that we have to have a class average size across the district. It's not by building, it's across the district, making sure we're in compliance with those contractual averages too. So we've begun notifying some of the teachers that potentially are in danger of being accessed. Dr. Dabrowski with the HR office has worked with Mr. Pickford in his role as union president, meeting with people. There are some other positions, and we've had some other retirements in other areas too that we're not going to replace. We don't have to replace. So we're looking to do that. So it's not just one unit that's going to take part of this. We're spreading the piece. You know, the vast majority of our staff, though, is in the teaching area. So last year, the administrative unit cut 3 positions. They took a major cut. That was almost 5% of our administrative team was cut last year. So we are not looking to cut our administrative team going forward for next year at this point in time. We're operating on the bare minimum where we are at this point, but other areas we have been looking at.
Thank you.
And we have had retirements in some other areas as well.
Ms. Pavlenka, did you have something?
Yeah, so this BOCES thing, what are they gonna rent our portables for, do you know?
Hopefully an instructional program. What they're looking, when they did their tour, they came looking, they said, we would really love to have one of your buildings. They said, not just yet. We're not closing a building, you know. Yeah, everyone, oh, you're gonna give us this, let me take that. What we're looking to do is, two of our elementary buildings, Mount and Nassau-Keg, their enrollment is significantly down. Years ago, the SAC programs were in the buildings. They were not in the portables. The portables were added almost 30 years ago. They're only supposed to have been here for 10 years. They've been here for 30. They've outlived their life expectancy.
Portables were there when I went to Mount.
Yeah, but some of them were there for.
More than 30 years
There were
ago.
offices in some locations,
Oh,
we had
okay.
transportation, and, yeah, we were that's when the administration building not being here was down at Nichols Road, but it wasn't just Nichols Road. We were all spread all over the district. We were
Okay.
not in a central location, which was, for a parent coming in, was inconvenience. Well, you have to come here to do this, but then you have to drive 3 miles to go here and do that, and 4 miles to go do that. Having it all centralized, it's been much more convenient for the administration and for the parents that are looking to do, especially registrations. But what BOCES is looking for is instructional areas. So the
Elementary level students?
different levels, so.
So you mean like there would be possibly high school students?
No,
Okay,
no,
so-
no, they're, the areas where we're looking right now, they're looking across the board for their programs. What we're showing them are just elementary programs with what we're looking at
So only elementary students would be,
in those areas.
okay. And when are
Now,
they gonna
they-
get back to you? When are they gonna-
You're from, whenever they decide to call us back. They're doing exactly what we're doing. They're going through a budgetary process as well. BOCES budget's over $440 million, so a little different than ours, almost twice our money. So they're just analyzing where they can go. And other districts are doing the same thing we're doing. We're not alone in this type of situation where every district's looking to bring in revenue. Port Jeff has already contracted with them for space and is working on that already.
So do we have an idea of what that space equates to dollar-wise?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
Okay. Like, is it even gonna,
All I can tell you is depending on the facility they need and how much space they're given, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, it could be millions of dollars.
a year?
Per year, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, at any point in time, if we ever decided that, yes, we could shutter a facility and repurpose it, like we said during the strategic planning process, one of the considerations could be that you devote a part of a building somewhere to that, and that would, again, bring in revenue.
Once you have your meetings with your building principals and central administration, will you get back to the board and the community as far as what this 30 looks like?
Yes, when we're doing staffing meetings consistently, when you were a principal here too, Vinny, we start in January, we start going through when our numbers start rolling in from the course requests, especially at the secondary level. Elementary is a little easier to project from, this class is gonna move here, this class is gonna move here. The only thing that is hard to project is kindergarten. So with our projections for this year, we were saying, we graduated a class in June of over 530 students, but our kindergarten class that came in September was only 320. So if that continues, we're looking at anywhere from a 3 to 5% reduction in class sizes for next year. Since September alone, we're 105 less students. So, and again, we do get people that move into our district, but we also have people that move out of the district. We're experiencing what a lot of the North Shore districts are experiencing with declining enrollment. People are not staying in the area in New York, whether it's because of taxes or their expenses. A lot of people are still working remote from home, so they can move to North Carolina, collect a New York salary, and not have to worry about being here. That happened with a family just recently who moved out. I met with the father in the hallway. He said, yeah, we're going to North Carolina. I'm collecting my salary from my company, and we're going down there, buying a home free and clear and doing that. We can't compete against that. But we're also, as I've been explaining during our strategic planning process, the demographics of our district are also changing significantly. We have had a 50% increase in ENL in 10 years, 20% in the last year alone. So we're bringing in students from other programs. Those students require special teachers, certifications, and special programs. One of the things in our budget process, while we're cutting, we have to add in some areas. We have to add another ENL teacher. We have no choice. We have to add an ENL teacher. We have, the classes are there. Additionally, we have mandatory counseling services that have to be done through special education. We have no choice. Our counseling services, they're busting at the seams. Our counselors, our social workers, our guidance psychologists, they're inundated. We're still dealing with the after effects of COVID. A lot of our students and our staff and our families are dealing with a lot of the issues from COVID still to this day. So it doesn't just snap your fingers and go away because we are all back in and everything's off and no one's wearing masks anymore. It still has repercussions across the board for everyone. So those mandated areas, we will have no choice but to add those things in. So just because, someone said, well, you shouldn't add anything. Well, the elective piece of adding things, yes, I can understand, but where we have to, we have to. These are the things where we have to.
So, Dr. Scanlon, you answered one of my questions right before I was going to ask it about ENL. But also, Mr. Carlson and Dr. Scanlon, just wondering about the impacts on special education as another one of our special areas. I know that there are a lot of families in our community that come here for the special education services that really value that service in our district. And I know that sometimes, whether it's special classes, whether they have 8 students or on paper they have 8 or they have 12 students, they're not always running at capacity. Sometimes the students are even able to enjoy an even more intimate student-teacher ratio. Is anything like that going to change with this? Are you anticipating any changes where those classes will be more likely to be at that 8 or 12 capacity or 15, depending on that special class size?
A large part of that depends on the CSE process and what students come into the district. So, we can anticipate and we have to plan, regardless of the students from wherever they come. When a student arrives to Three Village, if they had an IEP from another district, we must honor it when they come here, whatever services are in there. We will do a CSE within the amount of time required under the regulation upon arrival, but we honor their IEPs when they arrive here. The vast majority of our classes, the 811s, the 1201s, and 51s are at capacity. Where we've had space is where we have brought in cross-contract students from other districts. Three Village does have a lot of programs that many other districts do not have, nor will they start them because they may only have 1 or 2 students that require that program, where we may have a lot more. Remember, 15% of our population in Three Village is students with special needs. So we've been lucky enough over the course of years that our special education department has been phenomenal. It's the envy of many other districts. We have an ABA program. We have a lot of supports in our special education areas. And that's what attracts some families to our district, as well as other families, coming in with all the other types of programs. Three Village also offers one of the highest number of AP courses of any high school in all of Suffolk County. That's an attraction to families. We are one of the few districts that still have a self-contained gifted program in our elementary level. That attracts families. We have high passing rates, some of the highest in the state on state regents exams. That attracts families. So our academic reputation has not diminished whatsoever. And Three Village has also, it's an eclectic community. We have students that are in sports and clubs, but they are also involved in academic areas. So it's not uncommon to see a student that's in the play that's also the captain of a team. And that the respect and admiration between those different groups of students as we go through this is what we're all about. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that in this community. We should be honored by that. We should be celebrating that's our reputation, and that still hasn't diminished. We're having the same level of acceptances to colleges that we've always had. Ivy Leagues, Division I, sports, scholarships for arts and music, still some of the highest in the area. Where other districts were diminishing, art and music programs, we expanded. We're one of the few districts that still has, we have certified health teachers teaching health from kindergarten through 12th grade. You don't find it in every district. They sometimes will put that to the classroom teacher. I, for one, being a social studies certified teacher, would not want to be teaching some of the topics in health to students in younger grade levels without that certification and having that expertise. So we also have tremendous tech programs. Another area where we're looking to expand, as you mentioned in our strategic planning process, is our CTE programs. Starting next year. Right now we have a marketing course that's under CTE, that's Career and Technical Education. Next year we're going to have early childhood education. And because we have a pre-K program in district, our students will be able to do their internship in our own district with our own students. So that's something that's unique. And we're going to continue to look at other programs and seeing what CTE offers we can offer to students. Right now we have partnerships with about 6 or 7 universities in the country where our students get college credit before they leave, regardless of AP credit. A lot of Tier 1 schools will not accept AP tests for college credit. One, because a lot of colleges were losing money with students coming in with a lot of extra credits. Some of our seniors graduate with 25, 30 credits, almost a full year under their belt from Three Village. But when it comes from a school like Syracuse or Suffolk or Stony Brook or Farmingdale or Adelphi, those credits are transferable because they're on transcripts from those schools. So they have to take those credits. Now, granted, they may have to take it in their major. Usually it's a C or better in a non-major course and a B or better in a major course. But a lot of them, they're bringing those transcripts with them, and that's helping students, especially in these financial times. whether they decide to graduate early or pursue another major, that's helping our students get a leg up when they go to that. Same time too, we've been we've increased our relationships with the military recruiters in the area, not just in the sense of enlistments, but also with the academies. So last year, we didn't have one graduate in this district that went into the military or into a service academy. That has not happened in our history. So this year, we will have several students that will be going into that. And we need to honor those students because those career paths for those kids, those opportunities are tremendous. I will give a shout out to the IAB and Eileen Lippman and the business teachers and Michael Arlino and the entire BAC because of their hard work. We had a career fair that had hundreds of students attended that night. We had dozens of businesses from our community here helping students look at different career paths. The more we expose the kids to see what opportunities there are out there, not every kid has to go to college to be successful in their life. They could go right into a workforce, learn a career path, and be very successful, whether financially, if that's your goal as being your determination of success, or happy in whatever they do in their life. So the more we offer those opportunities for the entire eclectic vision of our three village community, the better off we're going to be.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Carlson, can you comment on the budget for late start time program that discussed in the committee?
Sure. So the Strategic Planning Committee, I mean, of course, the Governing Committee will be meeting tomorrow, and then the board will be discussing that. But as far as the start time piece goes, there, not to paint a broad picture, because we didn't hear from everybody in the community, but it seemed like, for the most part, most people, the vast majority of people, would be in favor of a later start times, especially for the high school. I think most of us agree with that. Again, I'm sure there are some people who would rather it stay where it is, but the problem with that is the cost. One of the things, and I brought this up at the start time subcommittee meetings. In fact, we had a speaker at one of our, I think it was our first meeting, Dr. Rosati. I think that was the first meeting from the Start School Later organization. And the speaker from that organization brought a, like a kind of, not a brochure, a kind of brochure kind of thing about the organization and what it's doing, trying to get later start times for schools around the country. And it starts by saying in schools, historically, did not have such early times, start times. It was in the 1970s, to save money, schools started doing transportation in tiers so as to reduce costs. And that's what resulted in the very early start times. And so that's what we would like to undo now. But the problem is now to undo it means, of course, it will cost a lot more money, right? I mean, it was done originally 50 years ago to save money. Now to undo it will cost more money. And with the tax cap, it means something else has to go to make room for it. If, we can't go back and change history, but, as Dr. Scanlon mentioned before, the budget failing 2 years ago, we're still feeling that. That was over $3 million each year now, forever, less in our budget that we have to deal with, work with. So if we had that money now, sure, we'd be able to do that next year, but we don't. So we have to get to the point where we have an extra between at least $1.5 million, probably closer to $2 million, to do the start time piece, to pay for those additional buses. So one way or another, with the tax cap, we have to make room for it by taking something else out, one way or the other. Now, if we were having this discussion 5 years from now, and I say 5 years, I don't mean exactly 5 years, but we know what's coming soon. I don't know exactly what year. Dr. Scanlon mentioned briefly alluded to it, the large number of retirements that are looming down the road, teacher retirements. It started in the 1960s, big hiring boom. 30 years later, late 90s, early 2000s, lots of retirements and lots of hires. I think, Dr. Scanlon, you were originally hired here in what year?
96,
And you were part of how many hired?
75.
75 teachers hired that year. So now when we get 30 years later and they all start retiring, if we have 40, 50, 60 teachers retiring each year, well, that's going to open up a lot of opportunities financially for the district to pursue those kind of things. I'm not saying we need to wait 5 years for it. I'm just saying if it were 5 years from now and we're having this discussion, it'd be a lot more likely that we could say, yeah, absolutely, we'll be able to work that into next year's budget. But, I mean, we would have to, we have to cut these 30 positions plus all the other cuts we did just to comply with the tax cap. And that's not even adding stuff other than things that we need to add. If we need to add an E&L teacher or things like that to comply with what we need to. But to add something like that, we simply need to make some more major cuts to fit that into the budget one way or another. Ms. Alma, I just want to go back to your question a little bit about special ed and the budget. So, of course, students with special needs have more mandated services than, and I hate to say it this way, but the state ed department uses it, regular education. That's their term. Anyway, of course, they have more mandated services. And to a, you know, it varies. I mean, we all know that. Not every special needs or student with special needs costs an astronomical amount of money. Some it's you know, minor services, some need more. Dr. Scanlon mentioned the tuition rate that's calculated by the state education department for our special education program that we can charge. The $92,000 for elementary, $93,000 and change for secondary is what the state education department says we spend on average for a student with special needs. That doesn't mean every single student that has special needs, we spend $93,000 on. That's the average cost. Some are a lot higher than that, some are a lot lower than that. So I've also heard in my time in Three Village, people say, well, I've heard that you give more in special education services than is mandated. Well, of course we do. We give more than is mandated to all of our students. If we only gave what was the minimum mandated services as required by law to our students, we wouldn't have kindergarten, let alone pre-K. We wouldn't have sports. We wouldn't have clubs. Our mileage would be anybody that lives kindergarten through 8th grade, you'd have to live at least 2 miles from school to get a bus. 9th through 12th grade, you'd have to live at least 3 miles to get a bus. Those are things that are minimum mandates. And of course, so all of our kids, we give more than the legally mandated minimums. And I don't think we'd be proud of ourselves as a district if all we did was the bare minimum. So what does that mean to students with special needs and pass in the budget, or passing or not passing? Of course it could impact them. Again, I can't say negatively, it will impact them. Now, some people might say, well, that's a good thing. Some people might say that's a bad thing. We're not allowed to say whether we think it's good or bad. However, some of those services absolutely could be reduced if the budget were to fail. So, I'm not sure if that's, I thought that's kind of what you were questioning about, so.
If I may, just for a moment, I wanted to speak, not specifically on behalf of the board, but to Dr. Rosati to say that I hope you and your group know that the spirit is there. The spirit truly is there to try to get the kids in later. I know. We hear you, we see you, we get it, we do. Tough times, it's a tough year. Did anybody else have any specific questions, thoughts? Okay, I did just have one other thing I wanted to say. When Dr. Scanlon spoke about advocating with our lawmakers who have been very open and receptive, that in addition to advocating for an index to inflation, we have spoken about eliminating transportation, security, and/or cybersecurity from the cap, that those seem like reasonable steps that we could take. So if any of you have great relationships with any lawmakers, that's a fantastic thing to lobby for, because that would be immensely helpful, especially as we move towards the electrification of the buses.
Can I just back you up on that point? You know, the electrification of the buses, if you haven't heard this situation, is that the proposal is by 2035, all buses, whether they're districts-owned buses or through bus companies will have to be electrified. An electric bus right now costs about 4 times the amount of money a diesel-powered bus costs. So those costs will be passed along to school districts, or if they don't have their own fleets, through contracts. So we're going to receive those issues. And with that coming out, that issue coming out as transportation, talk about a huge chunk of money that could be considered where that could be found and help offset the start time issue. There it is. And the entire board and the administration in this district fully recognizes that this is a health issue. This is no longer a debate of whether we should or we shouldn't. It's a health issue that we need to try to tackle as soon as possible. The circumstances of our finances right now are impeding a lot of our issues right now. So we're inheriting some of this. Inflation doesn't help at all.
And with the electric buses, the mandate for all school buses to be electric by 2035, but that also part of that is all new bus sales starting in 27 must be electric. So, well, sometimes we hear these dates. It's like, that's so far down the road. Well, 2027 is not that far away. Yeah, and that course gets passed directly on to us. So.
Well, yes, thank you. To leave on a low note, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the information. We appreciate it. Thank you for those attending and watching. And may I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second? All in favor? Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.